We are back, joined now by Chris Newman, legal director for the National Day Laborer Organizing Network. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course. So just tell us a little bit about your work at the National Day Laborer Organizing Network, because we're seeing, we're getting the numbers. There was a piece in Axios this morning about the incredible, not in the good way, influx of ICE arrests. They're primarily targeting people who have no criminal record, and even if the folks that they're also increasing and targeting, like they have an arrest, not necessarily a conviction, that kind of thing. And they're going after day laborers in particular, targeting them in at stores like Home Depot. We've been showing some of that footage. What has your organization been doing on that front?
Well, first, I think it's important to accurately describe the crisis because, I'm zooming in from Los Angeles, and what we're experiencing in the city here is nothing short of a human rights crisis along the lines that you described. They're looking for areas where there are large numbers of Spanish-speaking low-wage workers, non-white low-wage workers. They use this notion of criminality, oftentimes trying to identify one person as a pretext to then do a kind of arrest first and ask questions later approach, which is totally antithetical to every notion of due process and constitutional values that we have. And so locations such as day labor hiring sites, car washes, other locations where there are large groups of people tend to be what they call target-rich environments. And so it's fair to say that the day labor community has been terrorized first in Los Angeles, but now as we're seeing, it's spreading across the country. We've been doing everything we can with our scarce resources to rush to the gunfire and try to mitigate the unnecessary suffering that is being brought on by these raids. Ours is a network that is comprised of 70 small organizations around the country that work with day laborers. We kind of pool our resources. I've been the legal director there for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like the crisis that we are facing. On the other hand, the response of our members and supporters has been nothing short of inspirational. So what we do is in Los Angeles, first and foremost, we started something called the Immigrant Defense Fund, which I think you can find easily on Google. We ask for people to donate money, and then we make sure that low-wage workers get high-quality immigration defense in appropriate cases, and then we will sort of use those clients as places where we can get information to support other lawsuits as well.
We will put a link to that donation website that you mentioned down below, and where people are listening to or watching this. But can you speak a little bit more about your organizing strategy in the wake of this level of the human rights violations, the targeted enforcement of this, the ICE budget now, the crazy expansion of it is now hitting, right? October, I think, was when the fiscal year started. So the budget that was agreed upon by the Republicans and some Democrats earlier this year is coming into effect. And then you're also seeing those quotas being more fulfilled in terms of the amount that these ICE agents are doing, targeting people. Like, what has these last 6 weeks look like, even in comparison to the previous part of the year?
Well, there was a dramatic escalation across the country, but in particular in Los Angeles, both in scale and in violence. You got a little bit of an unlucky break that I'm filling in for my colleague Jorge, who is one of our gifted organizers. Endelon is primarily an organizing network, but I happen to do the legal work. So unfortunately, I think I'll probably keep veering my answers that way, just kind of reflexively. But what we've done, which has really been magnificent, is we've created this kind of Adopt a Corner program where communities are coming together basically to defend their own towns and locations. And so we have, soccer moms showing up to Home Depots with cameras, with Know Your Rights information, doing all of the rapid response kind of Migro Watch stuff. And those little committees are growing in sort of breadth and depth around the country, and it's been a beautiful thing to see, because I mean, what we're seeing obviously is a calamity that's being brought from the top down. And I think it's important, and I don't want to editorialize too much, to note that Trump is just sort of the capstone on a kind of bipartisan consensus war on immigrants that's taken place for over 25 years. And so it's not, I mean, and people get divided. Is this like not normal, or is it like just an extension of what has been normal? And count me in the latter camp. And so I think people, who are, obviously part of the intention, the political project, is to divide people, divide communities physically, metaphorically, but to see communities coming together, organizing around individual cases, accompanying people to ICE hearings, raising money, passing the hat for legal defense, doing what we just did last week in Monrovia, with incredible demonstration with a bunch of old, primarily elderly folks, doing an old-fashioned Alinsky style buy-in at Home Depot, clogging Home Depot up to sort of make the point that Home Depot needs to be safe for everyone. So we're seeing, in general, what I've said repeatedly, I think it's true, is the leadership that we're seeing in definitely LA, Chicago, other places, is leadership is coming from the streets. And we're just trying to support that leadership. And I think you've seen, for example, in Illinois, the governor and mayor have gotten the memo, in a sense, and I think are following the lead of a community that's unifying and coming together. I think California leaders have been a little slower, frankly.
Can you expand on that? Because I think that's an important point, right? I do think that the way that Pritzker and Johnson responded was more unified than anything we saw coming out of Newsom and Bass, and it feels like they're lagging a little bit in protecting the community.
Oh, to say the least, honestly. And remember, Mayor Bass had, her approval rating was in the dumps after the fire. People were very upset with how slow and uncoordinated the response to the fires were right when Trump took office. And in some ways, she's been buoyed by her show of support for immigrants, but she hasn't been doing the types of policy and legal interventions yet that we've seen in Chicago and Illinois, ditto with Governor Newsom. I'm not sure exactly.
Oh yeah. Go on.
And honestly, can I just say, here's my one little unsolicited hot take, since I'm on this podcast that I
editorialize away. This is what this is for.
I would love. I mean, we have two people that are clearly running for president, in Newsom and Pritzker. And rather than what we've had for the last 25 years with Democrats, which is just pretty talk, lip service, posturing, kind of focus group tested messaging, I would like to see, starting now, a kind of scorecard where we measure the response of Newsom and Pritzker for the next 3 years. Who did more to protect the residents of their states, the non-citizen residents of their states? And we'll start there when they go into the primary and evaluating before we hear what they're going to say about the DREAM Act or whatever. And it would be neat if we could get a kind of race to the top. We have, for example, in Seattle, the police chief there came out and made this incredibly courageous statement and show of solidarity, saying that he, anticipated potentially getting arrested to defend immigrants. People might be shocked to know Karen Bass appointed a Trump-supporting police chief in LA, in Jim McDonnell, somebody who was the principal opponent of the sanctuary state bill that Endelon championed, that is protecting hundreds of thousands of people right now, preventing raids from taking place at police stations and sheriff's departments and jails. So LA does not have an ally in its police chief due to the really terrible decision of Karen Bass to appoint that guy, versus, again, you see a guy like the chief in Seattle. We should see, I hope, a race to the top in terms of actual material achievements by local elected officials, and obviously everyone is welcoming Mamdani. I had a chance to speak with the mayor-elect. I had a sort of 5 minutes of fame working on Tomar Abrego Garcia's case, and I had a chance to talk to. It feels surreal to say, the mayor-elect at MSNBC in one of those green rooms, and he is the real deal. He's gonna, he's an immigrant mayor, and he's gonna stand up for immigrants, and hopefully he will set a new bar that will then inspire, Mayor Bass, Mayor Johnson, and other mayors to do more. So that's my little unsolicited plea for the political class not to, again, evaluate just all this messaging and kind of ethereal talk, which has kind of infected the politics of immigration from the Democratic Party side. We don't need shows of sympathy or solidarity or statements about dignity. We need material interventions that protect community residents like now. And there are lots of things that governors and mayors can do that hopefully they will be politically motivated to do in the next 3 years.
I think you can both make a positive case for immigration and return that to people's civic minds, which many Democrats are just not doing. I mean, Zoran Mamdani has been good on that, and that's just because he's pretty much good on everything. But there's no national messaging from the Democratic Party about how immigrants are our strength, that this is a nation of immigrants, the kind of stuff that you would hear about in history class or civics class or whatever when you were in high school. You don't hear that from the Democrats, and I want that to change. But the material kind of protections that you're talking about are of urgent importance. Can you explain what those look like in your experience, and what are some easy ways that this could happen?
Totally, but just before I get to that, I mean, it was a little bit triggering in your question. I'll take the messaging, the good messaging too. I was down in El Salvador. I got detained with Senator Van Hollen when we were trying to access Kilmar Abrego Garcia outside of CCOT. By then, we were 3 weeks or so into what was a sustained effort, clearly by Trump, to kind of use, Trump was using Kilmar to distract from whatever economic news, but we were responding. 3 weeks in, and I'm talking about every day on the front page, and there was zero message guidance from the Democratic Party to members that were going on Meet the Press or whatever. And I know that for a fact. And so you get an absence of messaging. Thank God Senator Van Hollen set the gold standard and introduced the notion of due process, and recognized the fact that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a civil rights leader. He will be understood in history books as a civil rights leader for all of us. And I'm grateful to Senator Van Hollen for introducing that message. But we get nothing from, for example, Majority Leader Jeffries. And then when we do get something, we get what we got yesterday, which was like trash. I mean, him defending the Trump border record was just astonishing, jaw-dropping. No need for him to do that, but maybe he's listening to whatever think tank in D.C. is telling him to triangulate. Anyhow, so we do need better messaging too. But the best way to have better messaging is to have good policies. And the first and best policy that you can have is something that prevents local police and sheriffs and criminal justice from cooperating with ICE, the so-called sanctuary policies. And we just won again the most recent legal challenge against the California policy yesterday. These have an undefeated record in federal court, something that easily jurisdictions can do. They can prohibit their local police and sheriffs from cooperating, because the way in which mass deportations are effectuated, and the reason why Obama deported more people in his first term than Trump did in his first term, was because they were using police as so-called force multipliers. These fat guys that you see on television running around chasing people and, at the Home Depots, there's only so many of them, and they can only get so many people. But if they can use every squad car, every police in a city, now all of a sudden you're talking about mass deportations. So that's the first thing. Other things you can do are, for example, like something we did in Los Angeles. You can require that big box stores, where big box construction stores like Home Depot, you can require that they build shelters and day labor centers. So Los Angeles has an ordinance, believe it or not, that requires, if Home Depot is to build another store in LA, that they have to build a shelter and a safe place for day laborers. That's something that cities can do. There's been a lot of interest in Home Depot lately. That's a policy intervention as well. I think that there's a whole array of things, and I could go on and on, but there are, in fact, good policies. There are lawsuits that can be filed, affirmative lawsuits that can be filed. I think it's been a mistake by some of these attorneys general to just merely jump in as amicus on lawsuits from the ACLU and lawsuits like some of ours. They could initiate their own lawsuits. I'll give you a perfect example. And again, not to keep like harping on my hometown mayor, who obviously does a lot of good too and is constrained. But that day, if you think back when they did that whole like military parade in MacArthur Park and down early on in June when they did the
Yep.
Easily, the city of Los Angeles could have filed a 10th Amendment lawsuit on that day, challenging the fact that they were doing a military parade, and usurping city resources, but they didn't. So hopefully there will be, a more legal capacity lent by local jurisdictions as well. And I do think also in the next 3 years, we're going to see some attorneys general and district attorneys distinguish themselves in this Trump 2.0 era.
Yep.
And again, not through kind talk, not through statements of sympathy, but through creative litigation. And whereas Trump won, there was this kind of flash of resistance, and then it kind of dissipated. It feels like, on a hopeful note, that there's a kind of steadier, more sustained material buildup that's happening this time around.
I do feel quite lucky here in New York to have, for our neighbors here, for us to have Letitia James, who has a pretty good track record of coming up with these kinds of creative legal ways to fight back against the Trump administration. Then she'll have buy-in from the mayor-elect, of course, Zohran Mamdani. So I'm thinking of you guys in LA. I think the organizing, DSA, that kind of stuff. You're getting there. You're getting there, but it's yeah, it's still lagging a bit. Go ahead.
My pitch to your listeners or viewers is, obviously, if you go upstream of this whole, everyone's got their theory about what led to Trumpism, but social isolation and an erosion of community are at the core of it, no matter if you're living in Nashville, LA, Chicago, wherever. And the one, again, hopeful and neat thing about getting involved in a hyper local effort to defend your community is that you meet really cool people. I remember when we were doing the fire response work, again, early when Trump was, I remember meeting people that literally did like a Tinder date at a mutual aid center. There's cool kind of community building that can happen. And you can kind of fight that sense of powerlessness that we all have. For us, there's no point in doing anything. You were asking questions about the budget. We are not, we're monitoring what's happening in DC, but it's not like we're going to the halls of Congress, like lobbying members of Congress right now. No, at Endlon, we are just working at a very hyper local level and recognizing that if we do our work right, that the people, the kind of would-be victims of today are going to be the civil rights leaders of tomorrow. And hopefully, there will be a time when we'll be able to come back with more collective strength and more collective buy-in from the American public for immigrant rights.
How can our audience help with your organizing network in terms of even, long-term building, but also in the short-term rapid response with ICE terrorizing neighborhoods?
Well, I'd say that, there's several ways. The first is just to go to our website and donate and know that we are providing high quality legal representation to people that otherwise wouldn't get it. Again, I'll kind of, since I'm, hopefully not speaking too much out of class, there's an interesting thing happening in the kind of immigration bar right now, where it's sort of the best of times and worst of times. There are incredibly heroic immigration attorneys that are doing really creative legal work, habeas actions and the like, but there also are a lot of bottom feeder immigration lawyers right now that are taking people's money and in hopeless cases. And so, and that's a little bit of a taboo to talk about. But so, we are definitely providing and linking people with high quality legal services. You can donate there. You can join our Adopt a Corner initiative. We have all kinds of, daily and weekly Zooms about how you can create a local committee whether it's to just go to your local school and help people pick up students after school, because a lot of parents are afraid to pick up their kids after school, or whether it's going to a Home Depot, or whether it's providing, information at work sites or chasing around ICE. You can do that. I think there are a number of ways, and we're trying to figure out ways to kind of onboard people. So I guess give money, give your time if you can, and if you can give your creativity, that helps too. I in my own neighborhood, when the raids started, I just one of the first things I did, one of my heroes is Mike Davis, and he always says, when in doubt, just go outside and start handing out flyers. And so I went all around Highland Park and passed out signs to businesses saying ICE is not welcome, get a warrant before entering. And now if you go anywhere for coffee in Highland Park, you'll see those signs everywhere. So you can just literally walk around your neighborhood and with signs that you print at Kinko's, and give them to your coffee shop and say, hey, I'm a customer here. Can you please put up this sign saying ICE is not welcome here? We're not going to serve coffee to ICE. Get a warrant. So you don't necessarily even need 10, 20, 50 people to do a direct action. You can do something in an hour. We have flyers that you can download on our website for Home Depot, and if you're not in a position of privilege where you can boycott, Home Depot, as many people are doing. If you have to go to Home Depot, you can go and pass out flyers on windshields of cars. It takes 15 minutes, and you can fill the entire parking lot of a Home Depot with signs saying ICE out of Home Depot, and the manager will get the message. So, I think the key is to just take some action, because to me, my biggest fear, Emma, is that there's this sort of thing that's happening where people aren't clicking on the links anymore because they don't want to get bummed out. A little bit like kind of, I think, what happened with Gaza. It's yeah, it's terrible, but there's nothing I can do about it. So therefore, I'm going to click on a link about Taylor Swift and not, the latest news of the atrocity in Gaza. And that, that results not just in the dehumanization of the people who are being, handcuffed and harmed unnecessarily. That results in the dehumanization of all of us. It's like a piece of our humanity dies when we just decide, fuck it, let's tune out. And the best solution to that is to take some small action, even if it's just sharing posts on a daily, putting it in people's face. Don't look away from this most recent story of a dreamer flying to Texas and being put into deportation, because I think we're all clearly collectively implicated. I mean, our taxpayers are funding these human rights violations. And the worst thing that could happen to us right now is that we become kind of desensitized or dehumanized ourselves into just a kind of complacency or sense of resignation.
Hear, hear. Chris Newman, legal director for the National Day Laborer Organizing Network. We will put a link to everything that you spoke about down below in the episode and YouTube descriptions and at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today, Chris.
Thank you for everything you're doing, and thank you for inviting me on. I really, really am grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, of course. Thank you for everything you're doing. Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Chris.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.